came out here today. This is about your right to know. It's about the right of judges and practice their job and security. The reason right, main security is able to provide you the information, the truth. It's about your right to know. That's what's at stake here today. These proceedings will continue this afternoon. They will continue tomorrow. Please stay here. Please voice your anger. Please tell this court how you feel about this travesty. And may I remind you that tomorrow after the proceedings, we will march to Downing Street and we will voice our opinion there. End this travesty. Free Julian Assange.
Thanks very much, Kristen. Well, I was in one of the courtrooms this morning, one of the overflow annexes to watch that trial. At one point, the court proceedings had to be stopped in the main courtroom simply because the audio feed to the annex was insufficient for the journalists and the other observers to hear what's going on. Now, that's not a question of justice. It's just a question of competence to allow observers. Justice that is blind, justice that is behind closed doors, justice which is secret is no justice at all. Now we've seen speakers from around the world. There are people here from around the world to support Julian Assange. And it's a very great pleasure to introduce to you now Vincent Stefano from the sister organisation, the Assange Defence Campaign in the United States of America. Please give it up for Vincent Stefano.
Brothers and sisters, I am the National Organizing Director of Assange Defense in the United States, and I come to you today in shame for my country, which is persecuting a man whose only crime is sharing the truth of the war crimes, misdemeanors, and calumny of the United States government. He sits just 12 miles from here in Belmarsh prison, but he is vastly closer to the American Gulag, 4,500 miles from here in Guantanamo Bay, created by my country to sidestep the principles that we hold dear, that we loudly proclaim to the rest of the world. The presumption of innocence, the equality before the law, a prohibition on torture and inhumane treatment, all of which have been denied to Julian Assange. Now I wish to address another individual who stands in the dock with Julian, who too will be prosecuted, who too will be denied justice. Who is that other unindicted co-conspirator? It is you. It is the people. It is your right to know that stands on trial in that courtroom. We cannot wait for the perverted British Jewish system or the perverted American government to provide us justice. Justice will only come when the voices of the people here and around the world are so loud that they can't ignore us any longer. Free Assange! Free Assange now! We will be here today. We will be here tomorrow. We will be here as long as the struggle continues until Julian Assange is free and reunited with his family. And should he choose to do so after his long ordeal, once again, inform, educate, and tell us what our governments wish to hide from us. Thank you all very much.
Now, as I said before, there is barely a human rights or civil liberties organisation on the globe which is not saying that this extradition should be stopped. Every single one of them realises the peril to freedom of speech and a free press because of the way that this is now being conducted. And I'm very glad now to welcome to the platform Alexis de Sueve from the International Federation of Human Rights.
Thank you. Hello to all of you. I'm Alexis de Sueve, lawyer at the Brussels Bar and Vice President of the FIDH, the International Federation for Human Rights. The FIDH, it's 100, and without freedom of expression, we have no democracy anymore. And that's why we are all here today in front of the Royal Court of Justice to support Julian Assange. All the journalists in the world, and a lot of them are here today, but a lot are absent. I really don't understand why they're not supporting more their colleague, Julian Assange. This morning I had a live interview on the radio, and the third question of the journalist, it was a Belgian journalist, was, yes, but Julian Assange has put the life of Americans in danger, and Julian Assange, blah, 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 blah. And I answered them, why this question comes from you, because that is what the United States are defending in court. Why are you, as journalists, repeating the arguments of the CIA? That should not be your job. And so, we must all be aware that our presence here, it's for the human rights, it's for the civil liberties, it's for the freedom of expression, and that you cannot be prosecuted by exposing state crimes, crimes against humanity, war crimes, committed by states like the United States, and be prosecuted for that. The question is, if Julian Assange is extradited to the United States, who will dare to be a whistleblower? Because either you're prosecuted, either the journalist who you give the information to will be prosecuted, and even if he's in another country, he risks to be extradited to a foreign country and faces lifelong prison sentence, 175 years or even more. And so it's our democracy that's in danger. We have to protect the investigation journalism, we have to protect the whistleblowers for our democracy, for human rights, for our fundamental freedoms. Thank you very much.
And now Stella Assange is going to give you her impressions of what happened in the court this morning.
I just want to speak a little bit to you because it's only a handful of us inside the room that actually can follow the proceedings. So I wanted to tell you about what was going on in there. We opened and we talked about Julian's political opinions and his political motivations. And they are clear and they're unchallenged, which is to expose state criminality. And what happens when you expose state criminality? The United States has taken a politically motivated prosecution against a journalist because he exposed them committing crimes. And so what's going on inside this courtroom is to determine how the extent of the cover-up. How is this court going to deal with this case? We heard that the case was only brought after the United States said that it would do anything to prevent the International Criminal Court from examining an investigation into US activities in Afghanistan, and of course WikiLeaks evidence in the publication that Julian's indicted over are part of that case. WikiLeaks has been used as evidence in the European Court of Human Rights and other foreign courts to expose state criminality. And the United States is abusing its legal system in order to hound and prosecute and intimidate all of you. What's at stake is the ability to publish the truth and expose crimes when they're committed by states. The outcome of this hearing today will make it clear the extent of the cover-up. The only fair, I shouldn't even talk about fairness at this stage, because the country that's trying to extradite him plotted to murder him. What are we even entertaining in these courts? How can any how can you even entertain this hearing knowing what we know? It's all on the public record. And yet it continues. It's only a handful of us in that room, but you know what the stakes are. You understand what this is about. It's about you, it's about us, it's about the public's right to know. It's about the right to be able to speak freely without being put in prison and hounded and terrorized by the state.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for staying. Thank you all for listening. Please do stay this afternoon. Please do come back and hear what will be happening in the courts. We'll be reporting back from this stage about 4:30 this afternoon. Please do stay around. Do continue to protest. Please come back tomorrow and be ready when the court hearing finally ends tomorrow afternoon to march from here to Downing Street. We are the last line of defence for Julian Assange. We are the last line of defence in the most important free speech trial this century. And remember what it was that the New York Times said back at the time of the Iraq War, that there are two superpowers in the world. One is the United States, and the other is world public opinion. We are today the representatives of that opinion on the streets of London. Please make sure you stay and fight and march tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Julian Assange. Free 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 Julian Assange. Did you get any video? Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Free Julian Assange. Ladies and gents, out of the road, please! Out of the road! Gents, find the road! Find the road! Never know, I might show up tomorrow. I'm not sure.
How are you doing? How's everything?
Hey man, that's cool. Been a while. You alright then? I'm good. How you doing?
Lovely.
Alright, I don't want to interrupt. You have a chat. No. You want to have a chat together? We've been having a chat. Yeah, look. Yeah, for a video.
Oh, well, we're not chatting about what we were chatting
about.
Are
we?
I'm letting you chat.
I'll learn.
You had no idea you were about to do something for us. You said, oh, I've got an idea.
You said amongst the crowd. They said that's
yeah, look, stay in. We're all in. Yeah, we're all in. You stay. It's not windy. I'll just do that.
Oh, you've got some eggs as well.
you know, some guys
freaking out.
Ben. Actually, don't tell me, but it is Ben. Ben.
What's my name? Yeah. Julian Morrow. How you doing? You want to join us for a chat? We're just...
oh, sorry. Are we having lunch?
Let's get in.
I'll hold it. You want me to hold it?
Well, yeah, just...
oh, you see it.
Be on guard.
I'll just take care of it.
Jamie, last time I saw you... I think last time I saw you was... we had a good chat. You were there today. What do you make of what just happened? Instead
Just there. But now I'm guarding the camera. She's turning her back to you.
Where we are is a very environment.
Down the camera, and I remembered that I told you don't do that. I said, well, she can wait all night.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't recognize
Don't worry. I don't want to take you all day protecting the camera. You're doing a good job. There were so many people here to see you.
Wow. He didn't even have the time to chat. He just forgot to.
Jamie, just give us the long and short of it. What are your hopes for tomorrow?
Well, I think sort of for all the things that I consider as possible, my favourite as one of the possibilities is that he gets his final appeal or application to appeal, chance to appeal rejected, but the European Court of Human Rights step in and take over the case. They issue the Article 39 that preserves where he is. Possibly he'd be moved to Strasbourg or to France, hopefully to a better environment, perhaps even let out on bail. But that, to me, of the possibilities, is my preferred possibility. Just kicking it down the road, leaving Julian in Belmarsh maximum security prison for another 2 or 3 years until his appeal is heard and it all gets sort of abused, is something I'm not keen on. Obviously, the extradition is totally under question. If he goes, he'll be dead. It'll be the end of our rights to know. I noticed it was interesting, Victor, that they made that reference to our rights to know. That's what this is all about.
I need my speakers, please, people. Bob, Daniel, Steve.
Who's she? I know her.
It's Ranjit Brar,
Come around this way.
Jyoti Brar, that's it.
Yeah, but who is she?
Communist Party, I think.
Oh yeah, interviews. She's been interviewed by Danny. No, not Danny Haifong. Who? She's been doing long interviews. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll take a picture of it.
Dr. Bob Gill, where are you?
Thanks for.
Where is he? Seem to have lost some speakers.
Not sure. Maybe you could go and find him.
Is anyone hiding Dr. Bob Gill in the crowd?
He's
Daniel
behind you.
Fuchs?
Garland Nixon, that's it. Brilliant.
Yeah, Garland, yeah. And he's on George Galloway's show sometimes,
Now, the
isn't he? Yeah.
question being, why don't we have the same kind of communists in France?
Le grand soir. Victor. Hello.
One thing.
Steve, should I put my hat on?
I called Le Grand Soir, one of the main French realm of media.
Ellie?
I'm calling back.
No idea where they are? Piss up some breweries, anybody? Dr. Bob Gill!
Final call.
Calling Dr. Bob Gill.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to start in a minute.
You're not a Maoist party, are you?
No, they say that we're Maoists. Yes, but we
Because of the stars, it sounds like, but when I heard it speak, I said, this is a Maoist analysis. So I said, okay, let's evaluate Trotsky.
Steve, I'm going to call you first then, Steve. Any idea? Steve? I'll go, you'll go. We can always do them in a bit. Yeah, we'll put each other. All right, this working now. Before the drums get too loud, this is your pop-up alternative demonstration. Thanks. Hopefully a couple of speakers we had lined up for you are going to turn up again. They've disappeared into the crowd. But we just want to make a few points that maybe aren't coming across too clearly from the official campaign. Number one is that since it is the non-crime of doing journalism that Julian Assange is being persecuted for all over the world, chased around the earth by the US imperialist ruling powers for having exposed their crimes. That's his crime. He told the truth about their crimes in a way where many people could find it out. Where is the National Union of Journalists today? Well done. Where is the trade union movement? Where is the anti-war movement? Where is the mass mobilization of British working people to stop these proceedings, to close down this travesty of a proceeding. The power of the British working class could stop this in its tracks if it was harnessed and mobilised today. We shouldn't be here to just express our opinions. We should be here to stop this in its tracks. This is a travesty. There's nothing legal about this legal proceeding. From start to finish, it's a joke, it's a charade. It has nothing to do with British law, nothing to do with American law, nothing to do with international law. It's in violation of the extradition treaty that it's supposedly following. Julian has committed 0 crimes anywhere in the world. The USA has no right to ask for his extradition. He committed no crime on American soil. He's not a fugitive from anybody's justice. He is being hounded by the imperialists for telling the truth. And the British working class, since it's our country where Julian is being targeted physically, it's our responsibility to mobilise the working people and say we will not put up with this. And it is disgusting that our trade union movement has not been mobilising the people to blockade the city, to surround Belmarsh, to surround the courts, to refuse to allow this joke of a proceeding to continue. They should be facing up to the state, and they are not. The other thing we should notice about these proceedings is what it tells us about the relationship between the British ruling class and the US ruling class. Because when the interests of US imperialism are threatened, the British ruling class feels itself to be threatened too. It will bend over backwards, break all its own rules in order to conform to the wishes of its senior partners in the USA to preserve the interests of US imperialism. There is no crime they will not commit. There is no courtroom they will not lie in. There is no rule they will not break. This is our much vaunted mother of all democracies and great British justice system in action. And what it also tells us is the truth about free speech in Britain. Because the truth is something that many who have opposed British imperialism have learned a long time ago, which is, yes, you can say anything you like as long as nobody's listening to you. That's the limits of the free speech we really have. But if you have something to say that threatens the stability of imperialist looting around the world, and you say it in a way that many people might hear you, you say it on a platform that people are looking at, you say it to a movement which is big and which is listening, they will come down on you like a ton of bricks. What we are witnessing with Julian's persecution is a punishment beating. It's a message to the whole world, not just to journalists, to anybody who wants to face imperialist power. If you are effective in bringing your message about our crimes to the mass of the people, we will come after you. And this is why it's everybody's problem, and not just a problem for journalists or activists or people who have noticed about this particular case or who think they care about free speech. This is about, number one, our right to access the truth, and number two, our right to organise against imperialism. And a real anti-war movement would be organising us to refuse to cooperate, because in the end this machinery only works because of all the work of ordinary people. And a trade union movement and an independent media worth its salt would be explaining to those people that they can refuse to cooperate with a criminal proceeding which is going on here. And the crimes are the ones behind the bench, not the one in the dock. Okay, thanks guys. I'm going to introduce to you now Steve Sweeney. He's a British reporter working abroad at the moment, but he's got something to say about journalism and free speech.
Thanks very much. I was going to say it's good to see so many people here today, but really we know that there should be more. This is a matter of grave importance to not just the people that are here, not just to journalism, but to humanity itself. Journalism is powerful. Journalism can change the world. And when I say journalism, I'm not talking about the stenographers for power that we see at the BBC or in CNN or the Telegraph or the Times. I'm talking about those who have the courage to tell truth to power. People like Julian Assange. And the reason, by the way, that you don't hear about it, you don't read about it, you don't see it on your television screens, is because the people that control these media organizations, they don't see people like Julian, or people like me, or people like you, as one of them. They don't see him as a journalist. They see him as a threat to power. Now, we are, as journalists, the eyes and the conscience of the people. But it's when we become a threat to power, and we are becoming a threat to power, because journalism is under threat like never before. The acceptable narrative, what it's okay to say and what it's okay not to say, has narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, where there is only now one acceptable narrative. If you speak against it, then you find yourself on the margins. Now, earlier today we heard the name John Pilger mentioned. A fantastic journalist, award-winning journalist, a heroic and courageous journalist. One of the reasons why I came into journalism. He was a great friend to Julian, a great campaigner for truth and for justice. And it's very sad that we lost him last month. But for all the fawning obituaries that we saw in the press, it was that very same press that marginalised him, that moved him from this award-winning heroic journalist to a crank, a weirdo, a Putin apologist. We all know the terms, we all know the narrative. Robert Fisk, exactly the same happened to Robert Fisk. He was pushed to the margin, an award-winning journalist, a journalist that went on the ground and reported from the ground, an old-school journalist, as you say. Another one of my heroes who I was fortunate enough to meet when I was in Beirut. And if you don't toe the line, not only do you become a threat to power, you become a target of power, which is exactly why Julian, who has committed no crime, who's been convicted of no crime, is currently in a high security prison, the kind of prison that is usually reserved for those that have committed terrorist acts. Yet his crime was exposing those who have committed terrorist acts. That's why he's there. Now, let's not pretend that our governments, that our media organisations really care about press freedom, because they don't. And it's very clear that they don't. Now, you can look at what's happening in Gaza right now as a classic example of that. Journalists being killed day after day after day. Why? Because they're exposing the truth about what's happening in Gaza. They're exposing the truth about the horrors and the war crimes and the atrocities that are being committed by Israel with the collusion of the British state and the American state. That is why they're being killed. And that is why, even just 2 years ago, the television station in Gaza was destroyed by Israel. And just last month, and we're coming up to the 20th anniversary of the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, which you'll all remember very, very clearly. Just last month I was in Belgrade, the Serbian capital, and I saw the remains of the RTS, the radio and television service of Serbia, that building destroyed. That building destroyed because it was deemed a legitimate target by NATO forces. Nobody has ever been held accountable for what is a war crime. Very clearly a war crime as defined under the Geneva Convention. The people that died, there's a plaque to the people that died in there. These were people that were working, young people mainly, poor people, working as makeup artists, and this kind of thing, that were trapped inside that building that was destroyed deliberately by a NATO missile. And just the only person who's ever been convicted is the manager of that building for failing to get the people out on time before the NATO missile struck. Absolutely sickening. Sickening. And we're coming up to the anniversary of that attack. Now I work, and I have to say, by the way, that the building was deemed a legitimate target, and it was repeated, the statement was repeated by the Guardian years later in order to justify that attack. I work in an area that doesn't reach the newspapers in this country, doesn't reach the television screens across the West. I work in a place called Donetsk, you probably know it. It's in the eastern part, or the contested area, shall we say, between Ukraine and Russia. It's on the front line of what's happening. And I can tell you very clearly that you're being lied to about what's happening there. Just recently, for example, I attended a massacre of 28 people in a marketplace. Poor people, elderly people, men and women selling fresh fruit and vegetables by the side of the road in a covered market. 27 people that had their lives snuffed out by Western weapons. 27 people who had names, 27 people who had people that loved them. 27 people whose names or lives weren't deemed worthy enough to report on by the Western press. 28 people in a bakery in Lysychansk. 28 people, including a pregnant woman and a child, whose names weren't worthy to be reported on by the Western press. And we're seeing this there day after day. And the people that are reporting on this, a colleague of mine, Rostislav Zhurovlev, who was a RIA Novosti journalist, he was killed in a cluster munition attack just a day after the United States authorized its use in that area. Ironically, he was traveling in a car with other journalists, having been on the ground in Zaporozhye, investigating the use of cluster munitions on civilian communities there. Now, we're here because of Julian Assange today. And Stella mentioned in her speech, and people forget this, when we're given assurances that Julian's safety, his health and safety, will be looked after by the United States. Now, nobody believes what the United States says, especially when it comes to safety, democracy, and press freedom. But what we do know, and Stella mentioned this, in 2021, Yahoo News broke a story that the CIA plotted to murder Julian on the streets of London with the collusion of the British intelligence services. Now, why do you think they want to do that? Last year, I was at the scene. I was in Iraq, in Baghdad, and I went to the scene of collateral murder. And again, the collateral murder, two of the people that were killed were journalists, Reuters journalists, targeted again by US forces. Those same US forces that laughed as they sprayed bullets and missiles down on a civilian population, massacring them in cold blood. The bullet marks and the holes are still there, and the community is still wounded by what happened that day. I spoke to a man, I spoke to many people, eyewitnesses, but I spoke to a man who lost his family on that day. And he said to me that it shouldn't be Julian Assange that is on trial here today. He said that it's George W. Bush and Tony Blair that should be on trial as war criminals, and that Julian Assange should be released and he should be treated as a hero. And shame on them for not doing that. But we know why. We know who the real criminals are. But I just want to finish really because, here we go, support for Julian everywhere. But Jyoti spoke just before me. I'm a journalist, I'm a member of the National Union of Journalists, and I can't see my union here today. I can't see the placards or the banners. I didn't receive the emails mobilising us to come to the court today to protest for press freedom for Julian Assange. You have to ask why. Shame on them. And shame on the Labour movement for not being here today. Shame on the Labour Party for not being here today. Where are they, these so-called defenders of freedom and democracy? Where are they today? They're not here, they're not with us. And I'll just finish by saying, really echoing what Jyoti was saying earlier, is that how can we stop this? How do we stop? It's all very well and good saying free Julian Assange, but how do we free him? How does that happen? We have the power as an organised mass, as the organised working class, to free Julian Assange. That power is in our hands, and we need to be mobilising and taking concrete actions to shut down the courts, to shut down the prisons, to shut down all of the state institutions that are locking up Julian Assange. That's how we do it. We need to build a mass mobilisation, a mass organisation to do that, and only then can we free Julian Assange. Thank you very much, comrade. Thank you.
Beautiful, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Steve. That's the sound of a real journalist right there. We have another young man who'd like to speak to you. Hi, Cuckoo. He's famous if you ever go to Hyde Park Corner. I'll hand over to him.
Back in 1989, I was living in East Germany when the Berlin Wall fell. And they used to say that when the Berlin Wall falls, we'll have freedom, democracy, and the money will be spent that we're spending on weapons will be spent on raising the living standards of the people in the West and providing peace, freedom, and plenty for the whole of the world. They also, by the way, in confirmation of what Vladimir Putin said the other day, they did say in 1989, 1990, that NATO will not move 1 centimetre east of the German border. That's what they promised. And that was the basis upon which the Russians withdrew, or Soviets withdrew, from Eastern Europe. Now, at the time they said, in Eastern Europe, in China, in the Soviet Union, they don't have a free press. You can't demonstrate, you can't assemble, you can't move. And yet, every single aspect of what they condemned in the Soviet Union has now become reality in the Western world, but far worse than what they claim existed in those countries. Far worse. As technology allowed us to communicate in ever greater means, as we got more and more interconnected in the world, they began to fear that some of that information would leak out. And it did. Someone mentioned a minute ago the Yugoslav war. information leaked out about the Yugoslav War, the Rambouillet Accord, the battle between France and America, and the bombing in Croatia carried out by on behalf of the United States of America, which escalated the war in Bosnia. Then they had lies in preparation for the Iraq War and the Afghan War, and information began to sneak out about that and spread to the population. Many people thought September the 11th and other events were orchestrated, at least partly, by the establishment. Now, I'm not going to take a position on that. The point is that the information was getting out and people were asking questions which went to the core of the way in which power and information dissemination was exercised. Then came Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Chris Wylie with the Facebook saga and the manipulation of elections. All the while, we thought that the increasing information availability would empower people to gain control over their lives and increase the power of the people versus the state. But what happened after the Arab Spring was that the states began to utilize the entire infrastructure of information to consolidate it into the hands of a minuscule elite of billionaires and big tech corporations, who in conjunction with Big Pharma, with the military, with the government, with the intelligence agencies, took control of the information infrastructure of the entire planet. And woe betide anyone who challenged that control that they had. And that is where we're at now. Julian Assange is in prison as an example, and then what followed afterwards was they began to look at everyone. All of you at some stage or other have been fact-checked. All of you at some stage or other have been deleted or frozen for a period of time. But more importantly, every single human being on earth is now under permanent surveillance by the intelligence agencies run by big tech in order to consolidate artificial intelligence as a mechanism to control every human being on earth by robots and artificial intelligence and drones. And what they're doing in Israel or in Gaza against the people in Gaza is preparation for what they're prepared to do in Britain, in Europe and America against us, against all our people in the Western world, as well as the countries around the world who are usually dominated by imperial power. What they are doing to the people in Gaza, they will do to us. That is the point about why we need to struggle against that barbarity being carried out. Israel, what people know, there's some people here got up a stand. Some of them were arrested, many people here don't even know. They were arrested on the mass demonstrations of hundreds of thousands of people for selling books and handing out leaflets questioning the narrative we are given about Gaza, where Britain and America are supplying the weapons and means to slaughter the people while washing their hands every day and claiming they're for peace. But the people who are arrested for giving out leaflets, they weren't arrested for normal crimes. They were charged with terrorism. It is terrorism now, according to the establishment, to give out a leaflet. A bloody leaflet. I was a member of the National Union of Journalists until November the 5th, 2020. At the beginning, I believed the story about lockdowns and COVID and the rest of it. Then I began to question, is it really true, everything they're saying? Are they not lying about X, Y, and Z and B and whatever? Are they not lying about the big pharma interventions? Are they not lying about the vaccines? Are they not lying about the injuries? Are they not lying about the lockdowns? During the lockdowns, the biggest transfer of wealth from the poor of the world to the wealthy took place in 2 years. The greatest transfer of wealth in human history, from the poor to the rich. The greatest consolidation of power in history, by big corporations, by big tech, by the states and governments and intelligence agencies. The biggest consolidation of power in the history of the world. But when I protested on the 5th of November, with my press card on display, saying I want to discuss and inform people what was going on, the police just round the road here, the police bundled me to the floor, 30 of them dragged me to the police station, and that evening the NUJ members who were observing this wrote to the head of the NUJ and said, we observed one of our members being bundled to the floor and arrested for no crime, just for speaking about free speech. And I've been doing that for nearly 40 years at Speaker's Corner. The head of the NUJ, I requested my subject access request from the NUJ. The head of the NUJ conspired with the police authority to have me arrested and to have my press card seized from me, claiming that anyone who opposed the measures taken by the government was a far-right conspiracy theorist. The truth of the matter is, there's a lot of talk about conspiracy theories in the world today. The main conspiracy theories in the world you need to be concerned about is the conspiracies happening in here, the conspiracies happening in Downing Street, the conspiracies happening in Washington, the conspiracies happening in the mass media, the conspiracies between the ruling elite and the exercise of control over the world. Seize back power over your lives. Organize, combine, organize, educate, agitate, mobilize the people from below. Get the young people on the streets. Coordinate, combine, mobilize the world to overthrow the tyranny that they are moving towards today. Thanks very much.
Wow. That's a man who's practiced his speaking skills. Beautiful, thank you. And a powerful, powerful message. Since Haikuku brought this up, I'm going to show to you something that you may not be able to see for very much longer. You see, I put a sticker on the front of there because the symbol on the front of that book got 4 of my comrades arrested for hate crimes. Now, if you look at the title of this book, it says Zionism, a racist, anti-Semitic and reactionary tool of imperialism. So what is it this book is trying to do? Number one, it's a history book. Information, all information which is already in the public domain. We didn't make any of it up, we just pulled it together to create a brief overview of the available evidence, an accessible narrative for people who don't have time to go and do big investigations for themselves, right? A small book. All historically accurate information. It's a history book. It's also a call to arms against racism. Against racism, against supremacy. But our people were arrested on crimes, on charges of hate crimes, of anti-Semitism, for questioning Zionism. This is the narrative of our ruling class. This is the way they use their control of the media to warp reality and twist our brains. This is how they can put Julian Assange inside there and turn justice system on its head, where the criminals investigate the innocent man and the stenographers for power report it as if it's a meaningful process and repeat what they're told to repeat in the order of importance that they're given by the press office at Downing Street or in the High Court or wherever the press release is being issued from. This is how our minds are controlled. And the more that our rulers and their system decay and become separate from the people, the more their words lose connection with reality. They say one thing, but they mean the opposite. You know, I grew up all my life with horror stories about communism and how awful it was and how, well, this might not be the best system, but it's better than the alternative because what they have is so horrendous. And now you realize all the stories they scared us with about Big Brother watching you was projection. We received their information and believed in it because it's what we expect from a state, to abuse its people and lock them up and persecute them and scare them and bombard them with lies. That all made sense to us because that's the reality of the world we live in. It's not the truth about socialism and communism, it's the truth about capitalism and imperialism. And it lands with us because we're primed to receive it because of the way that we live. And the dystopia we are living in right now, they scare us with the idea there's something worse around the corner. Don't agitate, don't organize, don't try and change the world. What you'll get will be worse. Total crap. It is bullshit, but it lands with us because we live in fear right now. And actually, they are projecting on us their crimes. When they told us horrific lies about the so-called crimes of the Libyan government, the so-called crimes of Colonel Gaddafi in Libya, it was total projection of the way they behave around the world. Colonel Gaddafi was a hero in the Middle East, in Africa. They murdered him for standing up to them. They told horrendous, disgusting lies about him and his people to prime us for not opposing their war to destroy Libya. And look at what happened to the world since they destroyed Libya. The most terrible crime, not just against Libya, against the peoples of the world. Against the peoples of the world, that crime. And we should remember also the important lesson for the workers of this country from that war was what our anti-war movement was doing in the Libya war. Because it tells you everything you need to know about what a controlled opposition looks like. They organized demonstrations against Libya. They repeated all the lies that the bourgeois press was telling about Colonel Gaddafi in their own propaganda. They said, yes, it's true. Colonel Gaddafi's killing his own people. It wasn't true. There was no reason to say it was true. They repeated it. They said, yes, it's true. The people of Libya want to get rid of Colonel Gaddafi. That wasn't true. There was no evidence for saying that. There was no reason to say that. There was a massive propaganda campaign of lies, like there's been against Julian. What are we told about Julian? He did this, he did that. He put some people in America at risk. He raped some girls. They come up with horrible crimes against him. Why? To keep us away from finding out the truth for ourselves, to make us feel that even asking a question makes us questionable. That's how they control the narrative. They make their propaganda so hysterical that to even start to question it makes you look as if you might sympathize with the horrible things they're saying. Remember what they said on the 8th of October, that what they said Hamas had done. They don't say Palestinian resistance, they say Hamas. Why? Because they've labeled Hamas terrorist and they've banned Hamas. So if you talk about Palestine now, you're supporting Hamas and Hamas is banned, so you're a terrorist. I've had members of my organization arrested under terrorism charges, their homes raided by armed police in the middle of the night. Why? Because we handed out a leaflet in support of the Palestinian people's right to resist. Their right to resist, enshrined in international law, agreed on by multiple United Nations resolutions. Why is this shocking? There's nothing shocking about it. Why are we being targeted for saying what we've said for 20 years? Because the ruling class fears that at this moment, when people are looking at and thinking about Palestine, there's a possibility that a message they didn't mind us saying when no one was listening might be listened to by a movement that's growing and becoming interested and activated and awoken. A load of people are waking up, and your ruling class wants to stop the people who are waking up from connecting with the people who've got something to tell them. Because there is where the danger lies, and that's what this issue of free speech is all about. They don't mind me saying all the things I've been saying for 30 years, as long as no one can hear me. That's fine. But they do mind if there's a big audience and that audience is growing and is connected and might decide to start moving. then they're worried. Julian threatened the status quo, not just because he revealed the crimes of imperialism. People have been doing that as long as imperialism has existed. But he did it on a platform that had mass awareness. He did it in a way that many, many people found out, and those crimes couldn't be denied. And the proof went round the world. And now it can't, the genie's out of the box and it can't be put back in. Everybody knows that when they lied us into war in Iraq, every single thing they told us to get us into that war was a lie. Not only that, we know that when they told those lies, they knew they were lies. You know, I'm old enough, I remember when we were being lied into Iraq and how big the movement was against that and how comfortable the ruling class felt to ignore the anti-war movement. Why? Because the leadership of the anti-war movement said this to the 2 million people on the streets. They went, well done everyone for coming out, you've made history. How do we make history? You've made the biggest march ever. Well done, see you next time. What could they have done? What could they have said? 2 million people ready to take their orders? Imagine if they'd have been prepared to use that power. The ruling class knew they weren't going to. So they were happy. They sent the bombers the other way while we were marching through the streets of London on a Saturday, upsetting nobody, stopping nothing. What they didn't say to us was, let's go down to the city, barricade the stock exchange, let's go to Parliament and Whitehall and barricade the offices where all these orders are being taken and carried out. Let's go to Northcote and stop the planes taking off. They could have done that. That might have given the ruling class pause. That might have made them feel that they had to stop and think again about their war. This marching up and down is one thing, but we've got to work out what to do with that power once we've started to organise it. And this is something that the misleaders of our movement are not prepared to tell us. And the fear, the punishment beating that's being given to Julian Assange reflects the ruling class understands what workers have not yet woken up to. That the real power in this country is in our hands. We have to organise to use it, but we have it. They can't commit their crimes without our cooperation, and this is the message we need to take back to all our trade unions, to our schools, to our communities. If we organise to refuse to cooperate, there is nothing they can do. They don't fight the wars, they don't make the bombs, they don't even transmit the lies. They don't know how to do any of the jobs. They give the orders and we follow them. If we refuse to follow the orders, they can't do anything. And this is the understanding that needs to be awoken in people. Now, look, since we've made this little speaker's corner here, and we have a microphone, I'm going to do an open mic now. So anyone who'd like to come up and address the crowd, feel free.
We'll all get bumpered on by police.
Come on.
Let's get in there, everybody, and start fucking shit up. Let's go and take it ourselves, do you know what I mean? I won't, because we'll all get in there.
What's your name?
Christian, way of the church. I'm John Lascelles, I'm a socialist. I'm also a Christian. Where is the church? Where are our church leaders? There are undoubtedly Christian people taking part in the marches and the protests. But where are the voices of our church leaders? Didn't Jesus say, let the children come to me, for such is the kingdom of God? He didn't say bomb them, maim them, bury them under the rubble, let them have operations without any anaesthetic. Where are our church leaders? Where are their voices? I very much believe in Jesus and what he taught, but I feel very much disconnected sometimes from what's being done. I appeal to all Christian people and Christian leaders, come out on the streets, protest to support people like Julian Assange and for press freedom, and to protest against what's going on in Gaza. This isn't the time to be silent. We should be working together. People of all faiths and none need to join together, and that's what I have to say. Actually, I think Archbishop of Canterbury's New Year message, of all things, was from RAF Bryce Norton as an example to be followed of service. What are the RAF doing now? Assisting Israel, bombing Yemen. Could he not have chosen the brave doctors and nurses who stuck by their posts in Gaza, knowing that their own lives are likely to be ended, and weren't prepared to desert their patients. Isn't that a better example of Christian belief and practice, regardless of their faith? But no, he chose to praise the RAF, our armed forces, are just obey orders without question. Now is the time for everybody, of all faiths and none, to come together, I think, and to stand up for what is right in this world. I appreciate having time to speak.
Anybody else? Come on, don't be shy. You're among friends. Come on, why not?
Why not?
Give it a go.
I went start a riot.
Oh, we quite like that. Who wants the boy who can incite a riot? Come on. Come on.
I'm not going to say anything crazy, but basically, like, look at Capitol Hill riots in America. No one was armed. Everyone got in there. They got the job done. That's all I'm saying.
I wish they had got the job done. Anybody like to come up and address the crowds? You know, we get told who our leaders are, and they're wheeled out in front of us, and most of us never elected any of them or chose any of them. We're told this is your leadership, and we have to listen to them mouth platitudes at us and then go away again. Here's your chance to say what you wish they would say.
My name is Amy Batlin. I'm from the Committee to Defend Julian Assange. We are a grassroots group operating for many years. We are here in support of Julian Assange. We have heard a lot about press freedom today, and we have heard a great number of wonderful speakers earlier. But we mustn't forget that Julian Assange is a human being like you and like me. No different.
Best human being in the world.
He raised himself with his work and challenged powerful interests. And he has experienced the backlash. So we as human beings stand in solidarity and extend our hand, our time today. We raise our voices in support to support him as a human being. Of course, his work is heroic, but he is one of us, no different to you and me. We could find ourselves in his position if we engaged in work that challenged the authority. So I want to say many thanks to people who have come here today to stand in solidarity with the WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange and to commit themselves to follow through, no matter what the outcome tomorrow might be, to continue supporting in this country and internationally the freedom of Julian Assange. So I'll welcome everyone to chant, "Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! And finally, there's only one decision! No extradition! There's only one decision! Free Julian Assange!
No!
Free Julian Assange!
No!
Thank you.
Any more for any more? The mic is still open. I'm very disappointed no one started a riot yet.
All right, in a sec.
So hello, I'm from Birmingham today, as you can probably tell from this slightly embarrassing hat. Anyway, what I'd like to say is just that the freedom of Julian Assange is dependent on the power of the people. The power of the people is what will free Julian Assange. We can't rely on these corrupt courts to free Julian Assange. They will only free him if they're put under so much pressure that it is politically untenable for them to send him to the United States. We can't rely on the corrupt Tory party who have done this. You know, Priti Patel signing the extradition order. We cannot rely on them. But neither can we rely on the corrupt Labour Party and Keir Starmer. Because Keir Starmer and his Crown Prosecution Service were involved in the whole Sweden, telling Sweden not to get cold feet over this rape investigation that the Swedish police were thinking about dropping. So it's dependent on us to get Julian Assange out, not anyone else. Thank you. I believe that unfortunately many institutions have failed Julian Assange, including institutions that should be standing up for him, like trade unions, unfortunately. So it's dependent on us as individuals to stand up and take back the power and say, we demand Julian Assange be freed now. Thank you.
Very well put. I think you spoke for everybody there. Any more? Mic is still open. Come on, I can see. There's loads of people in the crowd who are like thinking about it. I'd really quite like to do that. Come on.
Do it, yeah. Hi, it's a very small point, and in a way it might be a bit irrelevant, but I watched some podcasts on YouTube, and there's some gangster podcasts. I didn't even like the people, but what they were talking about was Epstein and the island in which the prison, the maximum security prison in which Epstein was suicide, and this is a bit. I'm not trying to freak anyone out, but they were saying the same things about Epstein that Stella was saying about Epstein, and this is completely unrelated. So there's 4 different sources saying about Epstein, not committing suicide. There was no way he did this. So there probably is a very likely threat to Julian Assange's life. And the funny thing is about this, the podcast that I was watching, these people are completely. It's nothing to do with stuff. They're not on about free speech. They're just talking about the prison. But the parallels are they're there. And so yeah, man, that's all I wanted to say is just that reality check. Thank you.
The USA has made it very clear that Julian's death is what they're after, one way or another. They're torturing him to death here. They'd be quite happy if he dies in a British prison and they don't have to go through the process of a sham trial over there before they put him into solitary and slowly kill him off there. They made it very clear that's what they want. If they can't get the death penalty in some way or other, they just do it slowly by squeezing. They've made that clear. And the CIA plot was just another way of achieving the same end. They don't mind how many of their own rules they tear up to achieve this end. And I think there's a really important lesson in there for us, isn't there? We were brought up to believe in and respect and have reverence for the state, its organisations, that they're there to protect us, that the justice system and the legal system and the police and the courts, they're all there for our benefit, to take care of us, and that if you follow the rules, nothing bad will ever happen to you. If we all follow the rules, society will work really nicely. It turns out we were the Muppets. The rules are for the little people. The ruling class tramples on its own rules every single day. We see that in the way it conducts its wars. We see that in the way it controls the media. We see that in the persecution, perfectly illustrated in the way they manipulate the courts and the prisons to murder Julian Assange in slow motion.